Hi, great to have you all with us. And I don't
We're
care
back.
what time it is, where you are in the world, you are now part of the Untold Radio Network's Down South Anomalies. My name is Jay Katz, and I'm joined each week by my astounding, my brilliant and beautiful wife,
Okay.
Aspasia. How are you, Aspasia?
I'm very well.
And
So,
I tell
this
you
week,
what,
yep.
we've had Tara Carter and women.
Tara Foster.
Tara Foster. What am I
See,
saying? I'm
names.
getting the names all muddled up here. But there are some powerful women behind the
Absolutely.
scenes of the
Oh,
anomalous
there's a
world.
lot of powerful
And
women.
they're
We
not
just
as-
don't get to see them
They're
very
not
often.
as insecure as the men that are always out there shaking it, but they're probably doing some of the most meticulous and incredible research we could imagine.
That's right.
This is episode 20.
It
we
is.
should be celebrating this.
20. Come on. When we get to 100, we'll celebrate.
Now, we have a mother of three,
Yes.
an astounding school teacher. She
Yes.
was a history teacher. Something happened there in her history class. There was a crack in consensus reality, and it led her to becoming a worldwide adventurer,
Mm-hmm.
an incredible author,
Yep.
a absolutely brilliant lecturer, and just an astounding human being. And we'd like to introduce Karen Mutton to Down South Anomalies. How are you, Karen?
Oh, thank you, Jay. What a wonderful intro that was.
You absolutely deserve it.
That's his secret hero power.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
we've been married for 32 years. And I mean, we always say that we're two sort of slightly frail people. I'm the most frail. We come together
Yeah.
to make one reasonable human being.
Absolutely.
But Karen, this is an incredible life path that you've gone on. You've become a remarkable and meticulous researcher of all things sunken, lost, and mysterious to history. How does a mother of three, a history teacher, actually start to have an interest in the world of the anomalous? How did this start for you?
Well, firstly, I got cut off for a minute or so. Would you mind asking again?
I don't mind at all. I'm very curious, how does a mother of three, a history teacher, reach the point where she decides that she's going to go against the grain of orthodoxy and start to look into alternative forms of archaeology and mysteries around the world?
Well, I was always interested in mysteries, even as a teenager. I came across some amazing authors back then who really inspired me. There was a lot of information about the ancient UFO people back in the 70s. There were quite a few of them. I'm trying to remember their names, but yeah,
So
they all got me started.
Did you get inspired by Eric von Däniken? I mean, that was a worldwide phenomena. Von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods.
Yeah, there are a lot of other authors. Raymond West. I didn't read Sitchin at the time. I found him a bit tedious. Brad Steiger, a lot of people who talked about all these anomalous things 40, 50 years ago. Their books are very hard to find now. Luckily, I kept some of mine. I was very much influenced by the author T. Lobsang Rampa, and I still consider him one of my greatest teachers. And I wrote a book on him because there was so much negative information about him that I decided to write a positive one. So
it's very interesting because
yeah,
40 Times did an investigation into him, and I thought at one stage that he had been exposed to the world as a possible charlatan, but that's not so.
Well, look, you'll have to think on a different level. We're talking about somebody who, I don't know if you know much about transmigration, someone who had to take over another body. So
Right.
the man who was actually writing the books had the spirit of a Tibetan Lama in him.
right.
And I was good friends with his secretary until she died last year. And she told me everything as far as she was aware. She lived with him and his wife for 25 years. That he was absolutely authentic, and everything he wrote, she believes was real. And he was treated that way because I believe he was telling the truth. And so they had to expose him. He obviously trod on a few toes, and they tried to expose him as a charlatan. But a lot of people didn't believe it and became his loyal followers, and I was one of them, even though I was only basically a teenager when I first read his books. But yeah, I'm very convinced. And when I read them now, yeah, he made a few errors, but he was an amazing person. If anyone ever comes across his books, I really suggest you read them. You still might find them in the secondhand bookshops.
Mm-hmm.
We've got quite a few of them, and look, he was totally a big part of mainstream culture. He would have been the first person in many ways in the West to expose some of the mysteries of the East to us.
Yeah, well, Tibet. Unfortunately, he trod on the toes of the famous Tibetologist Heinrich Harrer, who'd written 7 Years in Tibet, and he didn't like the fact that his Lobsang Rampar's book, The Third Eye, was selling more than his, so he teamed up with more academics, and they did everything to expose him and destroy him. They didn't destroy him, but that they did a terrible job and ruined his life, really. But he kept going. He had to leave the country. They were treating him so badly. Yeah.
Sometimes it's that old adage of don't shoot the messenger. You know, it doesn't matter how the message comes.
As long as it comes,
and it doesn't matter in what way it comes. If it comes through someone, you know, like him that could have been a trance medium and actually taking some other form of entity in and getting that material out there. I mean, I think the only other person I remember historically that had that same impact a little later on was Carlos Castaneda. And Carlos Castaneda has been sort of, there's so much mixed material
Carlos,
about him. But I don't think Carlos had the same integrity of Lobsang Rama, because Carlos was definitely, I mean, getting involved in some antics with the people around him that weren't so healthy. But I don't think Lobsang Rama ever had that.
No, Rampa was one of the very few who stayed by himself. He didn't look for teachers or students. He very much kept to himself. He had a lot of physical problems, and he really couldn't cope with too many people because he was extremely sensitive and with his ability to see the aura, and he just couldn't cope with too many people around him with negative emanations. So, yeah, that's another thing. He was authentic because he just wrote his books and he didn't, you know, set up a cult or ask people to follow him. He didn't want anyone to follow him, you know. He believed everyone should follow their own path. So he was just there writing his books and telling us, giving us information. As for Castaneda, I believe certainly he met a lot of, I've never actually read him, it's different cultures again, but he was very big in the 70s. And I don't really know much about him, but I believe he certainly had some authentic experiences too. So,
You know, there's an odd sort of moment of not simulacra, but there's sort of synchronicity there that, you know, people are drawn to this notion of alternative thinking, primarily through authors in the West. I think Whitley Strieber's Communion, when you look at the pre-publicity for that, where there was no discussion about what the book was about, you just had that communion face, the grey alien face, and it garnered like hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people that were having some sort of recall that knew deep within their DNA that there was some message in there for them. And I think Lobsang was one of those. I think Castaneda in an odd way was one of those. It's like we have a yearning in the West for something we've lost, a true sense of spirituality. Was Lobsang, was he, I can remember reading in, and this may be completely wrong, so tell me, was he a plumber from Bristol or Bournemouth or something like that? How did he start his career? He was an Englishman, wasn't he?
Well, you have to look at two separate lives. There was a Tibetan Lama who went through training in Tibet, and then he was in China during the war and captured. And basically he was at the point where he was about to die, and he was one of the very high initiates in Tibet. So they knew he had a task to tell the West some of the wisdom of Tibet. So they basically had to find another body for him to transmigrate into. And they found an Englishman who was very unhappy, wanted to commit suicide. And those lamas were basically said to him in the astral world, look, you know, we've got someone who wants to take over. If you do it, you're going to go to a beautiful afterlife and you'll lose all your karma. And so the man accepted, and he basically fell out of a tree, and they put the Tibetan Lama into the body. Now, that transmigration has happened quite a few times, and we still hear of it every now and then, where maybe someone's died, or they couldn't breathe for a while, they come back and they're totally different people with no memories, or they speak another language. That's basically often someone's been transmigrated. But really, it has to be done with, they have to be given permission. If
So
not,
they've got to do
actual
with
possession.
consent. Yeah.
Yeah, consent. Without, I mean, people can do that on the dark side. That's possession. And that happens
Right.
too. But it's given with consent. It's transmigration.
Right.
So then he found out that this man whose body he took over had a wife. And so he was in England. And after 7 years, he started writing his memoirs. And basically the rest is history. The lady I knew him right from that very beginning when he started writing the books. And
right.
How many books did he publish?
There was 19 official books, and there was
Wow.
one which he'd sort of written not for general publication, which was done without his permission, called My Visit to Venus.
Right.
There was another one called My Visit to Agartha, which I believe someone might have got a few notes from him and made up a lot of fiction around it. So I don't believe that one at all. And but yeah, there were 19 official books. Yeah.
Okay.
For the impact he had, has there ever been a documentary made on him? There's not one that I'm aware of.
There's one in French. He lived in Canada, in Montreal, and he had a French-Canadian friend who was also his agent, and he was also in media. His name was Alan Stanky. He he took a camera in and talked to him, but that's never been released, that footage. Right. I don't think there's anything profound. It was just chat, really. But no, I was the first one. I really loved it when I was growing up, but then I sort of went to university and got a real education and didn't think about all these alternative things for a while.
Yeah.
Became a teacher, but I came back in my 30s and rediscovered on the internet, and I found everything written about him was horrible. I thought,
yeah.
I was waiting to find a book of someone saying truth about him, and no one was. So I thought, oh, looks like I'm going to have to do it. And I came across his secretary.
Let's pop Karen's book up
with him. So,
yeah.
So people can see that.
And
I think
her memoirs was called 25 Years with Bob Singer. It's a beautiful book. Beautiful.
Right.
Right.
I think it's really important.
That's the book there if anybody's interested in.
Are aware of that counterpoint. We need to understand these stories honestly and truthfully. And if we look at the plight of Tibet, and if we look at the lives of each Dalai Lama, it's all based on transmigration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And they are well aware. They will actually find that child that has an acute memory of the past material objects owned by the Lama. So people need to, before you actually step back and go, how can this be real?
Yeah.
You actually need to do some extensive research. It must have been an extraordinary sea change for you. And I think a lot of us that have been touched in one way or another by the world of the anomalous, the world of the difference, the crack in consensus reality. We all have a period in our late teenage years, our early 20s, where we go, okay, I've got to stop tilting at windmills. I've got to become a serious person, inject myself into the working world, and this stuff is frivolous. I mean, my parents were like, you are wasting your time. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
But there does come that point where no matter what,
you always go back to it.
We have to go back to it because that is just, it's like someone's, drilling into your brain. You've got to go back there. How does a history teacher cope with those moments? And did you have moments in the schoolroom where you were reading Orthodox history?
Sorry, I didn't get to hear any of that.
That's okay.
I was teaching ancient history.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, mainly ancient history. I'm talking about Greece, Rome, and some of Egypt. There's not that much to argue with over that. I'm talking about much older, like thousands of years old, that
Right.
I really look at all the anomalies of, especially look at the architecture. And so I recently wrote Subterranean Realms, when I looked at all the underground structures in the ancient world, which they did without hardly any technology. And I still think, well, how did they do that? I'm sorry, you can't just do that with stones and wood. Like that picture there, that's the Hypogeum in Malta. Now, I've been in that, did a tour of it, and unfortunately it wasn't the best tour. They just give you one of those things to hold up against your ear, and they just play it and turn the light on and off. But that's at least almost 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
And someone did that without any metals. And there were 7,000 bodies originally found in there, but we don't know what's happened to them all. Now, my belief is because these bodies, a lot of them had elongated skulls. They were not allowed to be shown because I wrote about the elongated skulls in Scattered Skeletons too, and now they're finding them in many more places around the world. They certainly were another type of race, I believe.
The Skeletons book, just pop that up again.
Yeah,
I mean, this is an incredible thing because, what are we talking about here? If it's mutation or if it's cradle boarding, well, where is the parietal suture?
That's right.
Where is that thing? And we're talking about a larger CC capacity, brain capacity there. So we're not looking at mutation. My background, I trained as a nurse at Royal Prince Alfred here in Sydney, Australia. And let me just interrupt very quickly because we forgot at the start that we are actually broadcasting on stolen land. And this is part of the Gadigal clan and the Eora Nation, and we wish to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging.
Because we went straight into it.
We forgot that every time, but it's really important that people know that we're actually on sacred, historic land that dates back thousands of more years that Orthodox history would have us believe. And I don't know if you remember, you might be as old as we are. There was a TV She's not, okay. There was a TV... There was a TV program in the mid-'60s that the ABC did with our great Australian actress that recently got lauded in Hollywood, Jackie Weaver. Jackie Weaver called Wangina. And it was all about recovering elongated skulls in the Australian outback.
Yeah.
Really?
So...
Yeah.
And there it was even fictionalized in
back
the
in
early
1962, 60s. I think it was that series.
Yeah. So have you discovered that there's many of these skulls within Australia as well as other places throughout the world? Are you aware of any of that research?
There was a group of skeletons discovered down in a place called Cow Swamp in Victoria. Now, these were very primitive-looking skulls, which, had they been found anywhere else in the world, they probably would have been called Neanderthal or Homo erectus even, but they will not acknowledge that there were other primitive peoples here. Some of them definitely had elongated skulls, very thick skulls too. They're discovering a lot of places in Europe had the elongated skulls around the Black Sea, and which they believe they may have originated from. Some of the Huns had it, Hun burials, definitely Paracas in Peru, Mexico, China's had its own elongated skulls, certainly parts of the Middle East, parts of Egypt, Iraq, Malta. So, look, a lot of them were an example of head binding, but as you said, if there's the sutures, which we all have, which come as a cross, if they're not there, these are not Homo sapiens as far as I'm concerned.
No, they're not.
They just don't want to acknowledge them as a different species, really.
And quite phenomenal to think this is ubiquitous as well. And that must make you wonder, when you think about head binding, would that be something that came after the dating of some of these original skulls? Is that something that may be similar to what we see in this megalithic ancient architecture? Is that always the earlier structure is far more profound and architecturally astute than what's come after, which seems to be a way of mimicking or copying a far more advanced way of constructing things. Maybe tell us about your original adventures and where you went first and what sites really, excited you.
Well, I was lucky. I was single through my 20s and I was at university and then a teacher, so I had long holidays. I did all the big overland trips: Africa, Europe, Asia, South America, Central America. So, of course, I loved the ruins in all these places. And then about 10 years ago, I was able to afford to take my family to a lot of the places I hadn't been. So we've done a lot of traveling until the COVID lockdown. But, look, anywhere with ancient ruins, I just love to go there. And I still have a few places left, but the last one we got
Loving
to, that was Egypt in 2011.
Oh, you look gorgeous there. And you've got those pyramids in perfect.
I
look fantastic.
It's fabulous.
The last trip I did just before the lockdown, we didn't know it was coming, was South America and the Antarctic, which the Antarctic's always fascinated me, and I like to do a lot of reading on that. It's a very fascinating place. So to get up really close, not able to walk, but, about a
Tell us a little bit about the Antarctic, because, doing this program named Down South Anomalies, and we keep bending the actual equatorial line. But the Antarctic is really a challenge, and there are so many legitimate scientific mysteries down there, but there's a lot of extrapolation as well. So what stands out to you about that extraordinary piece of continent that is actually an incredibly large landmass?
Well, quite a few things. Just recently, some photos emerged. I don't know if they're real. Some were supposed to be from the Robert Scott expedition in 1911, I think, which showed these actual structures. We don't know if they're real. And then some also were emerged of Admiral Byrd, who flew down there in the 1940s. More structures. Now, it'd be easy to fake these photos, but I have heard from somebody whose information I trust, who's not out there but keeps his information private, that he knows that there are certainly structures down there, and he actually saw some. And some of the books now, he was telling me there are certain authors, fictitious authors, who actually he gave information and they wrote stories around what he saw. The two authors are Clive Cussler and Stephen Berry. Now, Clive Cussler wrote Atlantis Found, where there's a structure in the Antarctic, and Steve Berry wrote The Charlemagne Pursuit. Now, from what my friend in America told me, who's knows about a lot of these things, they got information from him that there was a city that was found. It was in an ice cave. It had been a high civilization at least 12,000 years ago. But the military got in and basically destroyed everything, took everything away. So the thing is, once the military gets involved, things just get destroyed.
It's all over. Yeah.
Yeah. So
sad, isn't it?
But he said if you read those books I mentioned, they're fiction, but the actual descriptions are based on reality. But what's there described is no longer there. There also Antarctica fascinates me. I mean, it's twice the size of Australia, and it's got all these dry areas.
Right.
And people don't know about these massive dry areas it's got. And there's one called Bunker's Oasis. And we actually have footage of Admiral Byrd landing on this lake, which was a proper lake. It wasn't iced over. It was in a dry area in the 1940s. And, we just think the whole island, the whole continent's icebound, but it isn't. There are a few dry areas. And there's also so much volcanic activity there. That's why it's melting. It's not climate change. It's the volcanic activity, especially in West Antarctica, which is the bit that the peninsula that hangs, that sticks out towards South America.
Right.
Yeah.
So that volcanic activity has been there all along. It's not something that's recent.
Yeah. But I think the volcanoes are becoming a bit more active now.
Yeah.
I think that last count, there's over 100. It's one of the most
Wow.
volcanic active places on Earth. So when they talk about global warming, they don't mention that there are active volcanoes under the ice
Right.
sheet. And a
Mhm.
lot of the ice in that part of Antarctica, which is the west, is melting from the bottom
Right.
upwards, which
From
is to do
underneath,
with
yes.
rather than if it was global warming, it would be from the top downwards.
Top down, yeah.
I
Yeah.
tell you,
And then there's a mysterious Lake Vostok. Well,
that's right.
Yeah.
Any rumours about that one? Who knows what's true?
And is that the lake that's actually been suspended under the ice for a long, long time? They've only recently broken into that, and that actually they were naively thinking, well, we're not going to find many forms of life there, and they've found an abundance of
That was
interesting.
what the Lake Wilhelms is one. Willems or that. But then Lake Vostok, there are strange stories, rumours coming out that they found a creature down there, a deadly creature, like a octopusy type squiddy thing, which I have no idea. I don't think it's real, but who knows? That had been covered by the ice for at least 12,000 years. But there's certainly an ecosystem down under these lakes.
There'd have to be. Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? The other interesting thing is, it's those stories that sort of verge on folklore and mythology that drag researchers like yourself out of their curiosity and drag us
out of the
to
classroom.
inquire more.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's not a necessity for that to be real or not. It's a lure that gets you to do more extensive research. Now, I've always found there's so much noise around the Admiral Byrd expedition down there.
Mm-hmm.
But as you just said, I was not aware of them landing in that slightly more arid area. I mean, that's astounding.
Yeah.
And
Bunkers
really,
Oasis. Yeah.
Right.
And really, Karen, all of us have to consider, why in the hell would they lead such a massive expedition at that time down to that area? It just doesn't make sense from a military finance perspective.
Especially what year was that? 1940? Yeah, in the midst of the war?
Project High Jump. Look, it makes sense if there was a breakaway Nazi society down there, and after they defeated them in Europe, they all went down there. Because if you read some of those, we don't know if the reports are real, but if there were Nazis down there, they had developed advanced technology. So that's what I was thinking. First, I thought it could have been UFOs, but now I'm more inclined to believe it was a breakaway Nazi society living down there. Still might be there. Yeah.
I mean, there's good evidence that we know, all of us do, and Paul Manning, one of the most courageous authors on map, his book's only just been reprinted by the exploitation of Amazon. I think they're not actually throwing any funds towards his family at all. That was called Nazi in Exile. I mean, he did an extensive investigation into Martin Bormann. It doesn't matter about Hitler. You've got to have the person with the keys to the cash tin.
Yeah.
And he went down to South America, and there was at least 900 companies that were formed within a short space of time using what looked to be money that was accrued during that despicable amount of time. So I think anything's possible. And look, a lot of those companies today thrive, and some of the grandchildren, as you'd be aware, you've got a huge investigative background into finance in your life as well, which I think is astounding. Those companies thrive today as Fortune 500 companies like Hugo Boss.
Yeah. And the rest of them. Anyway.
Excuse me.
You're right.
Yeah,
Let's go back to the subterranean, the underwater realms. I
love those.
If you can just tell us about
especially in this heat.
In Japan. Oh, yeah. The ones in Japan, because they've always fascinated me.
Yes.
And the images there are just like amazing.
Yes, well, that's the island of Yonaguni off the coast of Okinawa. Look, I don't believe how anyone can see that one on the left and not believe it's man-made. Look at those sharp angles. One geologist, Robert Schock, he said,
Oh, I love
he
Robert
wasn't
Schock.
sure.
He's
Yeah,
amazing.
but he wasn't sure about that one. But
Yeah.
his belief is it was above. It was above the water at one point as a natural formation, and it was altered. That's probably true. And then when the sea level rose, we all know that the sea level rose at least 100 meters at the end of the Ice Age, drowning God knows what off all the continental shelves of the world. That one's definitely been sunken at least 6,000 years. So yeah, I certainly believe that that's an artificial monument.
It so looks like it's not, it doesn't look natural, a natural formation.
What do you
it's
think
an odd
about?
shape. It's an odd shape, so we don't really know what it would have been. It wasn't clearly a temple or clearly a port or so yeah, whatever it was, we can't quite work it out, but it certainly has been worked on by man, I believe. Yeah.
There's a great controversy going on at the moment with the fact that finally someone, after your own heart, I'd say, has got up into mainstream culture and got a numerous part miniseries, and that's Graham Hancock on Netflix. Yeah. What do you think about all that? And what do you think about Hancock's research?
I have a lot of respect for Graham. He wrote the authoritative book on underwater archaeology called Underworld. That was about 20 years ago. And he and his wife actually dived all these ancient places. So I have so much respect for him. And I really enjoyed his latest series.
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
On Netflix. It was on Netflix. Yeah.
You know what amazes me? Oh, sorry, she's just kicked me. Keep going, Karen. She's punched me in the ribs.
He got so much slack for that, for that latest series, and I thought it was brilliant. I mean, he was showing wonderful graphics of some of these places. But yeah, he wrote Underworld, and then I was influenced by him to look at, when I wrote my book Sunken Realms in 2008, Underworld was my inspiration. He was looking for the ancient civilizations, whereas I thought, there's been sunken ruins from different ages. There's modern ones, there's ones from the mid-17th century, there's all sorts of, Port Royal in Jamaica sank in the 1700s. So I decided to look at all the different sunken realms I could find from all over the world, but especially ancient world is my speciality. Yeah.
You know what amazed me is that Underworld, didn't he do a 3-part series that was very well financed about 20 years ago? Now they're kicking up a stink now. They never kicked up a stink at that time.
Unfortunately, because he doesn't have the right connections, the right degree, they just pillory anybody. No one in academia takes any notice of what I say, and I don't really care. I'm not there for the academics. They might get I don't write for an academic audience, so I don't do the proper citations and all that because I think that's boring. But I like to write for the popular audience, but I do include a lot of technical detail, only because I find it interesting to describe somewhere. But no, I'm sure they don't take any notice of me. But I'm under the radar. No one talks about me, so that's great. I'm happy with that. Poor Graham, he really cops it.
Oh, look, I watched that series and I thought, why would anybody, have a problem with this series? This is so informative. It's amazing what he's done. He's bringing all these amazing ruins and places to the forefront. A lot of them I hadn't even heard about, didn't know about. You know what I mean? It's like it's always the same. They talk about the same things all the time, and there's some of the ruins in lesser known, not as popular countries don't ever get a look in, and they're just as fascinating,
I know. I think it's because ancient history is very conservative, and they don't really like to change the big picture very often.
No.
So if they find something which totally disagrees with everything they've written textbooks on and given lectures on, they don't like to do that.
Well, a lot of people's reputations, if they discovered something way back then, they're still riding on those coattails.
That's right.
If somebody comes in and says, okay, well, at that time we knew this and that was fine, but now we've discovered this, this, and this.
Well,
So
that's right.
and it's like, but because they're still in charge and they're the name at the top, of the pecking order, they don't want to move over and let the younger people with the new information come through. We actually need for these people to die. No, they have to die before the next lot can come through, because they're hanging on to all of that information and their reputations by the skin of their teeth,
But it's also got to do with the control grid, that we're not being allowed to know our true origins. We're not being allowed to know our true history. We're not being allowed to know the real alternative medicine that's been kept from us, and science, a lot of science, which goes against the academia is.
Yeah.
If it's, I know you hear so much that they won't agree with.
Mm.
So it's just the way of academia, really. You go against it.
It is.
I think it's a very courageous stance on your behalf. I think the other thing too is, just from a common sense perspective, if archaeologists, engineers, scientists, marine biologists are not willing to look into the peripheries of the bulk, the totality of information there, then there is a dereliction of duty.
Absolutely.
And
they
cannot throw shade on individuals like yourself, because they are the ones that have created this situation where the proletariat, where the lay person with the non-credentialed person has to pick up the slack.
Yeah.
And on their own frigging income,
9
times out of 10, isolating themselves, being part of public ridicule to actually push science, archaeology forward.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen those moments, and you're well aware of them, when it comes to incredible things that exist in plain sight, like those 3 majestic structures there in Egypt.
Yeah,
you don't take an Egyptologist in, you take an engineer in, and the engineer
will
has
tell you a
slight
different story.
heart attack looking at it from an engineering perspective.
Do you want to tell us about your experience in Egypt and the subterranean, stuff that you found there?
Well, there's different areas of Egypt I concentrated on. Firstly, there's the Giza Plateau.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you listen to someone like Zawi Hawass, there are no tunnels under there. That man is a watchdog of ancient Egyptology, and he doesn't let anything through that doesn't fit the paradigm.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is he was trained by the Edgar Cayce Foundation.
You're kidding me.
He received a grant from them. So, he's totally gone against anything alternative. But look, there are tunnels under the Giza Plateau. A lot of them, I'm not sure if they're real, but I have read a lot. Now, some have been actually discovered and officially and acknowledged. One's called the Osiris Tomb. Now, Zawi Hawass said he discovered it in 1919 and had a picture of him going down it. Actually, it was discovered in the 1800s, and then again in the 1900s, and then again all these other alternatives found it before Zawi got the camera crew to film him going down it.
Right.
But that's very deep. I'm trying to think, about 100 feet deep. There was there's some sort of coffin at the bottom of it. It's never been opened. It was in water. They called it Osiris because, he was the god.
Yes.
But look, I've heard rumours that there are tunnels leading off from them now. If they're there, they've been blocked off. But other authors mentioned that one author got in a one of those deflatable boats, Zodiac, and went through tunnels. And I actually saw it at a lecture, but it's never mentioned now. He actually said there was huge cavities under there. But that author's still around, but he's never mentioning that again. So my guess is he's been so that's my memory hole. But also if you look at the Sphinx now, Zoe will say, "Oh, there are no cavities in the Sphinx." Well,
there are.
there's one up the top where the head is. Now that was actually built by an archaeologist who was looking inside, so we don't worry about that one. There, apparently, Zoe and another one did find one near the rump of the Sphinx, which went down. But also, there are quite a few other cavities within the Sphinx and around it. Whether they are linked to the pyramids, so they probably are, but I don't have that information. But the one of them that really interests me is the town of Saqqara, which is near, a bit of a drive from Giza. Now, that's got the oldest pyramid in the world. It's called the Step Pyramid. It's
the Step Pyramid, yes.
It's like 5,500 years old. It was built by the pharaoh Djoser, and it was in what's known as the Old Kingdom, and that's basically the oldest pyramid there is. Now, there is a massive substructure to this Step Pyramid, and there's a huge shaft. Now, these people built all this before, basically even before metals, probably maybe a bit of copper, which is the softest metal. So we're supposed to believe they built 90 feet deep shafts with perfect edges, with stones and wood. No. And then underneath, there's all this tunneling that went on. Now, this is before supposedly the big pyramids, but we don't really know when they were built. So I would love to go under that Step Pyramid and see some of the substructure under there. And there was also a moat. So remember, this is before, in the Old Kingdom, before the major pyramids of Giza, if the dating's correct. And I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. And just, so we're amazed at the things they built upwards, but I'm amazed with what they built down. What did they excavate? How did they build these massive holes? Which today would only be done with, tunneling equipment.
State-of-the-art equipment.
Hydraulic.
But look, all over the world, they've done amazing things from Mexico, and they did underground in Teotihuacan without even any metals. I just don't know how all this was done. In ancient India, they did some extraordinary caves and tunnels, and they built this beautiful temple from the top downwards called the Kalysa in Ellora. It's most extraordinary looking temple. You can imagine it was done from the top down.
Right.
I don't know
how do you do that?
I mean, obviously someone did it. It's there, but it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Now that is Dvarka. Dvarka was Krishna's city, the one you were just showing me.
Yeah, that one there.
Now, if you look at the ancient Vedas, Krishna's city was destroyed several times. Krishna he was the main god, and he got very upset and destroyed them. Now, they've actually discovered that there are underwater structures off the coast of Dwarka.
Right.
So those cities were, they are destroyed or sunken. Now, there's another one off the coast of Madras. There's a temple called Mahabalipuram. It's a shore temple. It's about 1,500 years old. But there was always a legend that there were 7 sunken temples off the coast.
Right.
Now, divers could never find it. But do you know what happened in 2004, Boxing Day?
What?
That was the tsunami. That huge Indian Ocean tsunami.
Yeah.
And the water, before it flooded that area, went right out to sea. And people saw temples. There was at least 1 or 2 way out. I'm talking about hundreds of meters outwards.
Yeah.
And then it came in and flooded everything. But they did discover there are at least another 1 or 2 temples offshore. From Mahabalipuram, which is near Madras, or Chennai, I think it's called today. Now the oldest one they've discovered, and I haven't heard anything about it since I wrote my book, but it was in the Gulf of Cambay, which is way up north near the old Indus Valley culture, which today straddles like India, Pakistan, very dry area. But they have found ruins, not buildings, but objects off the coast. they're showing that there was a culture there possibly up to 8,000 years ago,
Right.
which again defies
Mhm.
the
Yes.
timeline.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of mysteries off India and in India. Amazing engineers there. There's actually one of the, you see, the Buddhists built these incredible, well, they built caves and they embellished caves, but one of them has this these walls that are polished like mirrors. They're so shiny. They use this technique that was lost for a long time to make stone shine like a mirror. Quite
Wow.
amazing. You've got to really admire these people. Yeah, so that's just some of the ones off India, and of course we know there's the one in Japan, the Onigiri. There's also some off the coast of Taiwan, walls
Oh, really?
and legends of sunken palaces, which is, you
Okay.
know, the Taiwanese islands extend down towards up towards Japan.
Mhm.
Also, the one off Cuba. Now, you had a photo of that one?
Yes, I did. There it
Now, that's
is.
an interesting
Yeah.
story.
Wow.
Now, that is not a photo, I'll say. It's recreated
Yep.
from a sonar image.
Yes.
So
Now,
it's still a 3D imaging of that area and those,
Yeah.
those pyramidal
now
structures.
my only issue with that is this thing was to about 1,000 nearly 1,000 meters below the surface.
Right.
How did it get there, and why
Wow.
is it
Massively
intact?
down. Yes.
Now that was only discovered in well, I believe probably the US Navy would have known about that. They were sneaking around Cuba for decades.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yes.
this was a lady called Sheila Zelinsky. They were doing survey work for the Cuban government, and they came across this. My belief is that it was probably an isthmus, possibly linking with the Yucatan in Mexico, which sank during a terrible tectonic event many thousands of years ago. Of course, National Geographic was going to do some sort of feature on it, because once they got involved, it went down the memory hole, and
Yeah.
we never heard
Unfortunately.
about it after that. But
Yeah.
these wonderful images, that one is created, but I have seen footage,
Right.
and they did go back. I've seen footage of big blocks of stone. Of course, they don't look like that. But you know, obviously there was something there which sank. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that Nat Geo and places like the Smithsonian are sort of like the gatekeepers of orthodoxy?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
think they actually find out of place artifacts, those UPAs, and hide them away from us? If I can sound so
Conspiratorial.
cliche there. Yeah. Grab our cat. We've got a very sick old cat here, Karen. Have we lost Karen there?
No.
You lost me.
No?
All I heard was, "Do I think?"
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious what your opinion is on Nat Geo
National
and
Geographic.
things like the Smithsonian in terms of UPAs. Do you think things are suppressed by those
Oh,
organisations?
absolutely. Yeah, look, the Smithsonian's famous for what it got rid of in the 19th century. And it all had to do with the prevailing attitude at that time. And then the Nat Geo, well, they don't like to really acknowledge certain things, that they'll acknowledge some and not the others. So they really could have done a wonderful job with their money looking at that Cuban ruin, but they never did. So, yeah, I have to think there's suppression, from the highest.
What would be the driver? What would be the reason of that? Is it the mere fact that there would be so much recalibration
You've got to rewrite
of
all the
history,
history books, don't you?
and that there's something esoteric behind this as well? I mean, what's your assumption on
I
this
don't
incredibly?
know.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good answer. I love that answer.
Yeah, I can't understand it myself. I mean, look, other scientists, if they get more information, they can change. Why can't the historians discover? You know, they make new discoveries and they mention them. Why are they allowing some and not some of the others? I think it's got to do with the timeline. If they're too ancient, they don't want to know about it.
No.
If they're too ancient. Or if they're in the wrong place to be too ancient, they don't want to know about it. Yeah. Whereas if they found that in, say, off the coast of Greece or somewhere, yeah, fine, the world would know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
I mean, there are ruins off the coast of Greece. We all know about them. And there's great ruins off the coast of Italy in the Bay of Naples.
Yeah.
Because we know there was a Roman town there called Baiae, and it's still underwater. People could go and look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, because this one was in the wrong place, it was too deep. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird.
What about here, Karen? What about New Zealand? What about Australia? And what about even structures, pyramidal structures that people have spoken about in places
I think
like...
the suppression here is quite strong, and possibly even more so in New Zealand. Anything which is pre-Maori, not allowed in New Zealand. Anything in Australia which doesn't follow the paradigm, or look, they have found the skeletons have been found here that are very, very odd human hominids. They're not even fully human.
Right.
Those people who found it were threatened.
Right.
They're just not allowing it at all, and it's a quite dangerous thing to say these things. See, I still travel under the radar. No one cares about what I say, so I keep saying.
You keep saying
I
that.
think there's that thing that Asper and I have always had is like, the more that you can hide in plain sight. And if you show yourself to be who you really are, that sometimes the kook factor is enough for them to dismiss you.
Yeah.
To go, these people don't have a huge credibility out there. They're not changing the way people perceive things.
Look, I don't have a PhD in ancient history or prehistory. I've only got a bachelor's, so I'm not important. But look, I've been to see the glyphs up at Carry On.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they are fake.
Right.
I've been told by my contact who talked about the Antarctic that they belonged to a pre-Egyptian race who was sent here as prisoners. But I mean, they're trying to say that they were done, in the last 30 or 40 years? No. There's something. And then they want to destroy that too. They want to build houses all around that. Oh. I'm surprised they haven't destroyed it with dynamite, to be honest.
Accidentally destroyed it.
It's safe when they acknowledge it's fake.
Yeah.
It keeps it safe in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was not acknowledged, that if they could acknowledge that there were visitors to Australia many thousands of years ago who were using an early Egyptian script, well, that ruins too many paradigms.
For sure.
They're not going to allow that.
One thing that seems incredibly odd and out of place in terms of just what we've looked at geographically across the planet and throughout history is, are we the only landmass in the world that didn't have any edifices constructed on it? That had no sort of... And we're finding now that our indigenous culture did have incredible farming areas that ran for miles, that they were farming all sorts of fish life.
There was a kind of Stonehenge.
There was standing stones.
And stuff.
Up at Mullumbimby,
Yeah, and
there's also the fish traps and the eel traps.
The eel farms they had,
And I think go on. Sorry.
Look, they were certainly creating things that were not acknowledged until quite recently. Don't know if I believe in everything Bruce Pascoe says in Dark Emu, but I think he has highlighted that there was some form of agriculture. They were, even if they weren't growing, they were harvesting certain crops and making bread out of it, their form of bread. So there is a lot which is now starting to come out slowly. But generally, they were not all over the country an agricultural people. And they didn't need to be. They had enough. No. There was enough. You don't need to invent agriculture if you have enough food. Because agriculture takes a lot of work. I've actually written a book, and it's not published yet. It's called The Dawn of Food. And I've looked at how agriculture began all over the world. Yes. And it was a lot easier to hunt and forage than to stay in one place and mine the crops and stop the insects and to grow things. So
Yes.
Yeah, agriculture took a lot of effort, and if you didn't need to do it, why? Why would they bother? Anyone there? I've lost you. I'm not getting anything. Still not getting anything.
Hello.
Ah,
Hello.
you're back.
What happened? It just all.
I lost you for about 4 minutes.
Might have been with our cat's 18 years of age, and we think he's had a stroke and got a bit of dementia. And we sit him close near us, but I think he wandered and knocked our power cord out.
Because I could see me, but not you.
Yeah, right. We just disappeared.
We're still recording. We can edit back, can't we?
Yeah, we're still recording.
Oh, our apologies. Yeah, we nearly had a heart attack here.
We're like, what's happened?
And we don't want to drive you mad in the least. And that was, where were we up to? That was brilliant what we were discussing.
It was. We were talking about the Aboriginal, farming and stuff. Yeah. And if things are too old, then they won't go there.
What's that? Where's that stuck?
Which one? It's fine. Don't pull it. Leave it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Don't pull any cords.
Don't touch any of those cords. I guess the other thing is, like, originally it was not just the colonial days, but it was the missionary culture too that changed the face of so much of this and made people so afraid to even discuss their original oral histories and their spiritual beliefs.
Just gonna look what they did in South America. The bishop of the day destroyed all the Mayan codices, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, you just get so angry when you think of the mentality of these people. Unfortunately, a lot of the oral history is gone with the Aboriginals, but I don't know. We seem to be getting some coming back. I don't know. Maybe some people are coming out who know it and they're feeling safe about it. I hope so.
Well, I think for a long time, it wasn't conducive for them to talk about these things, and so they just all kept it to themselves.
Yeah.
But now that it's becoming, there's more acknowledgement of our, Aboriginal people, then a lot more are coming forward. And I think before they go and they realise that they need to leave that legacy, tell everybody about it and get it recorded.
I think what you said before too about generations dying out. Now, one of our first podcasts for Down South Anomalies here on the Untold Radio Network was Matt Pohl, who was a curator at the University of Sydney and is now at the Maritime Museum in terms of Indigenous studies. One of his tasks was to go and look at museums worldwide at artifacts, sacred objects that needed to be returned to this country and returned to their original cultures. So I think the time is changing. You're getting younger people that are so much more aware that it is a really important history. And we actually did a great interview with him, Karen, because he spoke about the things that are deemed as mythology and folklore possibly have a true actuality as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's more respect as well, isn't there?
Yes.
We didn't respect anything about the Aboriginals until about 20, 30 years ago. But I know there were, down in Victoria is one of the biggest ancient volcanic areas in the world. And there were legends from the local people of fire, strange fires from the ground. So they had that memory of many thousands of years ago in their folklore.
How astounding.
Anyway,
we were headed off. You know, my wife has got me trapped on I have true fear of this stuff, but she loves cruise ships.
I love cruise ships.
To me, it's like being.
This pandemic just put such a crimp in my cruising. It's because I'm like, I've been like 28 days cruising already. I'm going, you know, I'm going to hit the gold star cruising person. But anyway, we went to Noumea.
Yes.
And on the Isle of, is it the Isle of Pines?
No, it's Lifu, is it?
No. It's the Isle of Pines. There's actually a structure there. Now, who was it? Warren?
It dates back thousands of years.
Yeah, some sort of a
it's like
concrete,
an odd form of concrete. No one understands.
Yes. So, you know,
we were curious if you might have known anything. To me, Karen, it's like being trapped at Westfields on a Saturday morning and then released from its mooring. I go, oh God, what's going to happen to me here? But she thrives on them.
You loved it. You loved that.
If we could do a bit of research and reading, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're very good books to read about the David Childress books about exploring.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
he wrote about those places. Now, and I do believe there was some sort of much larger landmass in the Pacific which has sunk. A lot of these islands may not have been islands. I mean, there's some extraordinary ruins, and I haven't seen them. And Ponape and Easter Island, and they're still on the bucket list. Especially Ponape. No one ever seems to go there.
I've never heard of that one.
Tell us about Ponape.
Oh, it's in the Marshall Islands. It's this extraordinary stone palace or structures built sort of half flooded by water and with all these sort of hexagon-shaped blocks of basalt.
So where are the Marshall Islands?
Oh, just in the middle in Micronesia.
Oh, right, okay.
Ponape. It's extraordinary ruin. As I said, I haven't been there. It's you know, you don't just do tours there. It's just so I guess there's really no tourism there, but it has been. There's good pictures of it if you go to Google, Ponape, and they don't really know who built it and why. And there's evidence that a lot of it extends underwater. So David Childress did some diving there and saw that some of those big blocks, which had been cut from other islands, were, you know, sunken. So fascinating place. I just wish I could do a cruise that went there.
There is a cruise that actually goes to past like it left Sydney, I know, and it was 23 days. It went to New Zealand, and then it went to the Galapagos, and then Easter Island, and then it stopped in was it Santa Cruz or in South America, and then you had to fly back, and I was so
fabulous.
And it was only about $2,500.
Oh, really? Wow.
Seriously. Yeah. Now that's a cruise.
I've done 20 cruises, but I still want to do more because there's some places you can't really go to unless you go by ship. So
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, but then there have been sort of a lot of illnesses on cruise ships in the last few years.
Yeah, no, but you can get sick just being in a plane for like 20
know.
hours with a whole bunch of people. What's the
I know.
difference? You know,
can
Yeah.
get sick down
Anywhere.
at Cole's New World. Well, tell us about. I'm very curious as to these, really ancient subterranean structures. Why was there an obsession to build underground?
Well, that's a good question. What are some of the reasons? A, for burial, of course, that's the main one.
Mm.
The catacombs and all that were from the Christian Judaic era.
Yeah.
Roman era. B, for worship. There are certainly some temples like the caves in India and all that are all worshipped by the Hindus and the Buddhists. C, it could be mining. Things are just, they've left tunnels for mining. D, it can be for water. I wrote a whole book on water realms, so a lot of these underground tunnels and that were built to ensure water supplies, and some amazing structures in the ancient world to do with water and how they found it and how they transport it. It was quite amazing. And one of the places which had a very amazing ancient water system was the Sri Lankans. We never hear about it. I mean, it's not being it's not forbidden archaeology, but it's just ignored archaeology.
Yeah.
They were building amazing tanks, reservoirs 2,000 years ago. And
Well, see, the thing is, it's because, we're told all the time that, progression, it starts off down here where there's like nothing, and then it slowly goes up, and we're the pinnacle of all technologies now, you know what I mean? And so if you go back 2,000 years and they tell us that there was a whole water system, a whole plumbing system back then it's like, well, we haven't really progressed that far, and it was already sorted out. That technology was already back there. So what is really going on?
Well, with water, I mean, just take Sydney 200 years ago. It didn't have a water supply. You just had to get it out of the well. Whereas the ancient Persians built massive tunnels called qanats, Q-A-N-A-T-S. They built wells, digging, and then they tunnel underground. Quite an amazing structures and the ancient Persians. This was 2,500 years ago. Also in Peru, in the deserts, they did the same thing.
Yeah.
The Romans and their aqueducts. I mean, they were very clever people.
Exactly. Yeah.
But even before that, the Minoans, 1,000 years before the Romans, they also had plumbing in their main palace. They actually had flushing toilets.
Wow.
Something we didn't see in Europe for another 4,000 years.
Yeah, exactly. So
there was amazing things which have been developed and forgotten, and we've only
and they make out like we've discovered, the West has discovered all these things now, and it's like, no, it's all been, you've built on stuff that was already. Now the other, look, I have found this Turkish city, and then underneath, there's now that's what is going on there.
All right. Well, first thing,
that's not for burial.
If you go to the area, it's very volcanic. So the ground is made out of, and the rocks made out of tufa, which is a very soft stone.
Very porous, is it?
Very porous. So it is easy to dig, but
sure,
that area of Cappadocia was also the crossroads. So a lot of invading armies over 2,500 years came through that area and laid waste. And so I think the people started tunneling down, and I actually visited one of them when I was young, and went down 8 floors, and there was like thousands of people who could live down there, and they had their own water, they had their own ventilation.
Well,
well, we believe we don't know how to date them because they're rock, but it's believed that a group of people called the Dacians first started tunneling about 600 BC. But a lot of the main ones were built by the Christians who were suffering persecution once Islam came to that part of the world.
Yep.
the Islamic armies would come through and massacre the people and burn their crops and steal their animals. So what they'd do is that once they heard the armies coming, they'd go down there, they'd shut it off just with a few air vents.
The hatch shut and away you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're quite amazing. They've found over 200 now, and people are still discovering them. I mean, you hear stories of some guy in that area. Oh, he had a plumber because his toilet was backing up. So the plumber came and found an ancient city under the toilet.
Under his house.
Yeah. That's
wow.
So many of them. And as I said, a lot of them do have to do with the Christians. And they're also who are Greek. They were all Greek speakers and Greek Orthodox. That was their culture there before the Arabs, the Seljuk Turks took it over in the it was the 11th century. But yeah, they had made beautiful churches there too. You see some of these underground churches with the brilliant pictures of Christ and all that in the icons of the Orthodox Church. So yeah, as I said, mainly for the Christians, but they believe some of them were built much earlier, and we don't know why. But as I said, it was a crossroads, and people were always invading and laying waste. So it made sense, really, if you could go.
Yeah, you needed somewhere to hide.
Well, until the invaders pass through, and then you come out again and bring all your animals out. And yeah, so, fascinating place, Cappadocia. If you could ever go there, it was just awesome.
No,
awesome.
I'm actually Greek, but I've never been to Greece. I have to go.
You were born in Belgium.
I was actually born in Belgium, but I speak my parents' village dialect, and
which is something that could turn your hair grey. She's from Lesbos, and that dialect is very,
the village that my parents come from is a very old village, and it was there back in the Byzantium time. So it's had this really strong culture. And when I actually speak Greek, anybody from any other part of Greece literally does not understand what I'm saying. And I always thought everybody spoke like I did until I met people outside of my parents' village who started speaking, and I'm like, what are these people saying? So I realized very quickly that I really didn't know how to speak.
And what is the name
proper
of that
Greek?
village?
Aiashos. It's on Lesbos.
So you don't have the pure Athenian dialect?
No, I don't. I actually went and watched a movie the other night, a Greek movie, and thank God it had subtitles.
Oh, really?
I couldn't understand most of it. But if you speak in my parents' village dialect, I'm like fluent in it. So anyway,
but their village dialect, Karen, is so caustic and obscene at
We're
times.
Very ribald, apparently.
It is shocking.
We're very naughty and very up front and in your face kind of people, and it actually comes through our personalities, which is bizarre because I've never even obviously it's in your DNA. Because I've never been there, but I'm like I just stepped out of there yesterday, so I don't know. There you go.
Come from a proud land, so much history there.
I know. And I need to get there eventually. But anyway, it's all good.
Why, something that's always befuddled me, and there's so many mixed hypotheses to this, but we go back to some of the very first structures, architectural structures in the world. They're at the highest aspects you can imagine. The material for them is quarried miles away.
Yeah, I know.
And they are megalithic. I mean, it's like one moment we had nomads that were roaming around, and the next minute they decided, okay, we're going to build something that's
even difficult to build today.
Any architectural structure in the world. Why is that? And do you prescribe to the theory that they might have had some outside help from something else?
I don't know why, but now they've discovered in Turkey there are much older structures at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan.
Oh yeah, isn't that an amazing site?
12,000 years old.
Yeah.
And they have no idea why they built those and buried them. In fact, there's far more for them to dig up. Look, they could have easily had help from someone. maybe elder culture, which has disappeared, with more advanced, could have helped them. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Why would you go to all that effort?
Well, you wouldn't.
And do you
There's
see
no need to.
do you see in the masonry of that time, do you see things that are equivalent to modern technological techniques? Because supposedly in Giza, and people like Trevor Dunn are pretty sure that he's looking at high frequency drilling, high speed drilling, and
Sonic
they're
drilling,
finding
yeah.
drilling cores. So you're looking at like technology we weren't aware of for the last 100 and something years.
Oh, look, I've seen some of those pictures of cores and that, and they couldn't have been done by anything rather than a high-speed drilling instrument. There's so much we don't know. And some of the pictures, I think, are hiding some of the information. Like when you see those pillars with the four, they're called JED pillars, the four horizontal. I believe they could have been some sort of power source that we're unaware of or we won't acknowledge.
Well, it looks
there's
like
a lot about ancient Egypt.
like a cookie cutter has gone along and, stamped them out
I've seen that too.
almost. It just,
Look, there is there are certain chemicals that can make stone a bit soft, but we're talking about granite, which is one of the hardest stones on Earth. So look, I believe, and that's always whether it's real or not, that there's some technology we don't understand, and they've used something we don't know about. I can't think of any other way, or someone's done it for them.
Yeah,
I can't believe
giving them the instructions.
Primitive people with no knowledge of anything. It's the logistics of it.
It's really refreshing for you to hear you say that, but to also not adopt a steadfast hypothesis.
Well, if you don't know, you don't know.
I think the downfall is a lot of people like then to get into supposition, and supposition's exciting, but we can't be sure.
No. So, I mean, the ancient astronaut thesis, I believe, they actually did come, but I don't look for the evidence. It's a belief, but I can't prove it. So I just say, okay, I put it on the table and say, I believe in that, but leave it there. But it's the drilling into the ground too. I think, how did they do that?
Why did they do that?
And how and why?
Don't those three pyramids have the least sinkage of any architectural structure in the world?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think they do.
The water table is a bit dangerous under there. I think some of the Sphinx is in a bit of danger from the water table, from the Giza Plateau.
Right.
But look, they're extraordinary. They're extraordinary structures. I mean, I went into the Great Pyramid and I actually laid in the king's coffin.
Wow.
It was really strange because we went in by ourselves, and for some reason my husband couldn't believe it. As soon as we get to that coffin, Karen just jumps in and lies down like that. And some Chinese were behind us. They come in laughing and carrying on. They go up to the coffin, see me, they go, oh! So here's me lying in there. That gave them a big fright. But I don't know. I've heard that was used for initiation. Look, I don't know if that's true or not, but I've read certain that there was those coffins, and same with one in Tibet, were used for initiation techniques to drive the soul out of the body. And things in the astral.
I've read Alan Alford's books too, that he says that because they found residue of chemicals and stuff that goes from the king's chamber into the queen's chamber, and they were actually mixing chemicals, and that was this is another theory, somebody else's theory, and he gives all the the statistics and
compounds
that were in there, and says that this that the pyramids were actually an energy device that used to that's just another take on it. So look, who knows, we don't know, but you can throw all those things into the hat and, just let them sit there, and everybody will choose whatever resonates with them,
I wrote a theory in Water Realms. Water Realms, look, I don't know what they are, but somebody came up with a wonderful theory that they were used as a water catchment, because the water would come down, run down the the valley, when they'd walk to the Valley Temple.
Yep.
They reckon that could have been an aqueduct, and the Valley Temple, which is basically a huge room without any doors, could have been some sort of water storage. I don't know. I like new theories.
Well,
I like that one, but I can't prove it at all, and I don't even try.
No.
But yeah, I wrote in my book. I just said, well, look, here's a new theory I've come across. That's interesting. There's also a very ancient megalithic structure in Egypt called the Osirian. It's behind the Temple of Seti. I haven't been there, unfortunately, but the official archaeologists say, oh, well, it's part of Seti's temple, which came a lot later. But this is a megalithic structure, and it's much lower in the ground.
Right.
That could have been some sort of water storage facility too. But they won't acknowledge that either.
Wow. Well, how does I'm really curious how your daughter.
She won't hear you. She's frozen a little bit. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We're having moments technology here, but I'm sorry. I'm really curious how your husband and your daughters, how did they feel about your interests?
Oh, my husband rolls the eyes, but I've got one daughter, two sons. I've dragged them along around the world. They've been to some amazing places.
Well, they're
and
lucky.
I think they enjoyed them, like the pyramids and the Hypogeum in Malta, all sorts of places, because that's my passion. But they're not really that interested. But, that's Mum's thing,
Okay.
That's all. It's Mum's
And,
thing.
Waterworld out there, that big budgeted film, that was an economic flop. Has anyone ever decided to option one of your books? And, Water Realms would be perfect. Make a great TV series, a lot of feature.
Graham Hancock's book, Underworld, is definitely the best underwater archaeology book. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just thinking there's a desperation now. I look, we have a fetch box. You look on the Travel Channel. They could call it the Paranormal Channel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of travel in there, but people are just curious about these things and excited about them.
Yeah.
And I think that the option is there. Where do people find your books, Karen? What's the best way to get hold of them?
Oh, they're not actually easy to get hold of in Australia. They're published in America by Adventures Unlimited Press. But most of them I actually have e-copies of them.
Right.
If people want to email me, they can buy an email copy for about $12, something like that. Like Sunken Realms, I did update that one about 3 or 4 years ago. So I've got the e-copy. The other two, I think I've still got these two.
Right. Yep.
And I think I updated Scattered Skeletons too. Yeah, I update them every now and then, and the publisher doesn't want to update them, so sometimes I'll sell it just a few. Not many people care about them. But
Adventures Unlimited, people can just find that by Googling in. That is David Hatcher Childress. And people would be aware of David Hatcher Childress. He's had a huge profile for years.
Absolutely.
We've interviewed him. He's a lovely gentleman.
I spent time with him.
He spends time ubiquitously up on Ancient Aliens. I'm surprised that TV series haven't grabbed you yet.
Well, David, I met him at a Nexus conference. We were both speaking at the same time, on different subjects. But he's a nice guy. I mean, I kind of envy all the places he's been, but I don't think they've got children, so they didn't have to spend decades of bringing up kids like I did. But I probably could have made that many countries if I hadn't had them. I just love to travel. I am booked for a trip to Sri Lanka because I want to see those water systems there, these ancient water systems in a few months. Looking forward to that. But, it's I think Nexus Magazine sells a few of my books too.
Right. Okay.
But people can get in touch with you.
I've seen them up. They're selling them on Amazon. Is that right?
Are they? Yeah. I don't seem to get any royalties from Amazon.
Oh, of course. Okay. No, of course not.
Best to go to Karen herself.
Yeah.
Do you mind
I could sell a few ebooks, generally like I think Amazon sells ebooks, but I've never received a cent from them. So I thought, well,
Wow.
Okay,
sell it to
I
myself?
think if you're out there listening to this, that the author herself deserves to get the financial
So how can they
reward
contact
and
you,
not a
Karen,
leviathan like
through
Amazon.
Facebook or through?
Sorry, I
How can
lost
they
you there.
contact you? How can they contact you to get your books?
Oh, well, I've just by email, really. Can I text it to
Yeah.
you later, my email? And
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
send
yeah.
it there.
And
Absolutely.
can we put that down
We'll
as
put
a
it-
link?
Yeah.
As when we put this
I'll
up
put
on
it
the
down.
chat?
Yeah.
I'll put the email down
Yeah.
in the write-up.
So
and they can
basically, I
contact you.
just, I have a few PDFs of all of them.
Okay.
And the one I'm still doing, The Dawn of Food, I'm still revising that. But that's another interesting one. how
What's that? What's that
agriculture-
one about?
Oh,
the
that
Dawn of
sounds
Food.
fascinating because that'd
Yeah.
be about mass harvesting, wouldn't it?
Well,
The domestication
Well, yeah.
of food.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, we know that from what we know, it's mainly the Middle East around the Levant, and that they went from foraging and hunting to
Mhm.
agriculture. And we think
Right.
climate change had a bit to do with it because they were harvesting wild grain around Israel and Syria 20,000 years ago. They were harvesting and
Wow.
making some sort of flatbreads.
hmm
But then that was still at the height of the Ice Age. Things began to get warm.
hmm
But then we had a very dry, cold spot called the Younger Dryas. So what we think is these people were sedentary. They're living in villages, but the food started to dry up. So they thought, well, we better work out how to grow our own. And that's why, because climate change has been going on for forever.
For sure.
It's not a new thing, and it's not
No.
caused just by carbon dioxide. It's caused by
No,
This is-
it's just a natural progression. But we have affected things. I mean, we have changed the
Oh, absolutely.
environment by
absolutely. But
pouring all
look
that-
who's
yeah,
we.
Yeah.
Mainly the industrial military complex with what
Absolutely.
they're spraying in the skies and everything.
yeah, all that stuff. All that stuff.
And that's a very recent history. That's only a couple of hundred years that we've come in and done that through greed
Yeah, exactly.
and control.
Yeah, but because I've
But you
always
know
said, yeah, go ahead.
There are changes going on in this solar system right now. And basically every planet has experienced climate change. So something is going on. It's either with the sun or cosmic rays coming in.
Right.
I found out every planet's experiencing changes. So could be a bit of a worry because we don't really know what it is.
Well,
But
know,
it's not just us driving SUVs.
no. But you know what? You can worry about things like that, but if you can't control it, forget it. Don't worry about it. Just, live every day like it's your last and be good to each other, and that's all you can do. Yep, that's all you can do.
Now, we can't control the fact that our magnetic poles are shifting. We can't do anything about that either.
No, we can't. We
just
can't.
enjoy what we can.
Yes.
Evidently, the molten core, if we're led to believe it's there and not the hollow earth, it's evidently stopped spinning right at this moment as well. You would have seen the worldwide progression of animals across the planet that have just out of the blue started sort of wandering in circles.
Really?
Yeah.
It's
very interesting.
I think you can have iron core and hollow earth, because the hollow earth, I believe, is tunneling systems rather than just massive cavities.
Yeah, a massive
I believe it is a hollow, well, not fully hollow, but riddled with caverns, and it easily could have populations living down there. A lot of legends tell us about the ancient people living in the earth.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of legends and a lot of modern day writings have actually gone there as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm really curious about before we end up today, Karen, is you've traveled the world. You've written about this. You're an incredibly courageous and intrepid researcher. Have you had any anomalous or spooky personal experience when you've been out there?
Nope. Nobody.
Wow.
Never had anything. That makes me think, good, I'm under the radar,
No, but I'm talking about any sort of spectral, ghost, UFO sighting. Nothing.
No, I certainly believe in them. I have no problem accepting them. I've got psychic friends who can tell me this, but No, I actually believe, I was telling Aspa earlier that I believe that they're possibly from another dimension, and the dimensions, the veil between them is getting thinner because of all the electromagnetic radiation we've created, and that could account for how creatures come and go, ghosts come and go, UFOs come and go. If they're coming across different dimensions, then we can't find concrete evidence because they're only here for a while and then they're gone.
Yes.
So,
Well,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah. No, that I was saying,
That's a really interesting point, because you know what, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but so many researchers we've spoken to in just this short amount of podcasts are actually all perceiving this from very much that same angle. They might be looking at it from a quantum entanglement perspective. One of them is looking at it from a dark matter perspective, and evidently from a cosmological perspective, there's as much dark matter, maybe even more, than three-dimensional matter, and it could be going through us right at this moment. And that would really assist in some of the conundrums and questions around ufological abduction experiences and some of the things we're seeing historically. You know what, Karen? Asper and I can't thank you enough for your time today. And sorry,
can I just mention one thing?
Yes, please do.
Orbs. I had photographs which I didn't see, but when they came out, of orbs.
All right.
I was in the Great Pyramid, and when I got pictures back, I thought, oh, what's all this dust? Anyway, I showed it to a psychic. She said, oh my God, where is this place? There's all these energies. And I said, I thought it was dust. Also, the Yellow Mountain in China, which was a very sacred mountain, it was raining, but we had pictures of orbs. Some people say, oh, it was just raindrops, or maybe, but they look like orbs to me. Anyway,
the episode prior to this with Tara Foster, or Tara Australis, you can look her up on there. She's a worldwide producer, and she's just edited Close Encounters Down Under, a series that we assist getting up. It's coming on to 7 Mate in the next few months. It's premiered on the Discovery Channel in Britain. She is an incredible editor, and she can do it with film and digitally. As she's well respected, you go through things frame by frame. I asked her the question about, is this dust particles sitting, out of focus and creating these sort of notions of depth of field? And she said it's got nothing to do with dust at all. And then she went into a couple of situations where she was traveling.
She was on a train,
and orbs were flying
and an
past
orb
her.
just popped out in the front seat in front of her, and just went past her, actually touched her ear, and just kept going. She turned around and watched it go out of the train. It was just bizarre. So you have had, I mean, you mightn't have seen them, but you've had orbs around you. So,
and
I'm not a psychic person, but
no, you don't have to be.
I
don't think you have to be psychic. It's just stuff that's happening.
But you're very intuitive, and you're
I like things.
Well, you're open. You're open. I think when you're open, things can come to you, or if they are there, you're more perceptive to them.
And you know what? You're not a selfish, arrogant person. You're a beautiful person that gave up part of your life and your follies to have children and a family, and always think that actually is a much more rounded, incredible soul, because I think we've ended up in a Western world where narcissism and feeding that myth of the cult of the personality has just got a little too out of control. Seek out Karen's books. Seek them out through Karen. Seek them out through Adventures Unlimited.
Yes, we'll put up an email that you can contact Karen on this.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks. So, thanks very much for having me. It's been
Thank you. Fun. I mean, when we saw you in 2018,
we were both excited.
Yeah, I was like, must get onto Karen. Karen would be perfect for
we haven't stopped
podcast.
Reading that book of yours about the skeletons, and it's still, books like that become a strong resource for that, a reference guide.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I like to think so. I'm a big picture archaeologist. I like to look at one theme across different areas rather than concentrate on one country and one thing. I like to, like water across the nations, food, underground structures. So, Yeah, that's fun. I enjoy doing it just because I love learning. I love learning. But I'm going to be doing another lecture in May.
Yep.
With Marie's group. So
UFO research, New
so
South Wales.
Yeah,
Keep an eye out for that lecture. I think that's in Burwood. And the other thing is just keep an eye out for your work. And we'd love to ask you now if in about 6 months' time we can get back to you and have you again on the podcast.
And you can update us on what else you've been doing.
Well, yeah, tell you about what's all those beautiful tanks and reservoirs I visited in Sri Lanka in a few months.
Okay.
Oh, that'll be astounding.
Fabulous.
Well, look, have a lovely evening and take good care. And thank you so much for your generosity of time. And we celebrate who you are. You're a true inspiration, Karen.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so that's been our podcast for this week with Karen Mutton, and we'll be back next week with another fascinating
episode 20. And you've been on Down South Anomalies, and this is one of the most pioneering
you need to stop whacking me in the head.
You've got so many things attached to your hair there. This is one of the most pioneering researchers of ancient mysteries you're ever going to come across on the planet. So get up to speed, people. Get hold of this lady's books. And thank you so much for your time, Karen Mutton. You've been on Down South Anomalies.
We'll be back next week. Bye.